On March 11th, 2011, at 2:46 p.m., the ground in Japan shook for 6 minutes. It was the most powerful earthquake ever recorded in Japanese history. But the earthquake wasn't the real disaster. 51 minutes later, a wall of water 40 meters high crashed into the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. What happened next? The Japanese government tried to hide from the world for years. 3 nuclear reactors melted down. 150,000 people lost their homes. And the consequences are still unfolding today, in 2024. This is the story of Fukushima, the nuclear disaster that almost made Tokyo uninhabitable. Japan is a country built on a nightmare. 4 tectonic plates meet beneath the Japanese islands, making it one of the most seismically active places on Earth. The Japanese have lived with earthquakes for thousands of years, but Japan also had a problem. No oil, no gas, no coal. After World War II, as Japan rebuilt itself into an economic superpower, the country needed energy. A lot of energy. The solution seemed obvious: nuclear power. By 2011, Japan had 54 nuclear reactors, producing 30% of the country's electricity. The government promised the people that Japanese nuclear plants were the safest in the world. They had to be, because the plants were built in the most dangerous place imaginable, on the coast, in an earthquake zone. The Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant was built in 1971 by the Tokyo Electric Power Company, or TEPCO. It had 6 reactors, sitting right on the Pacific Ocean in Fukushima Prefecture, 220 kilometers north of Tokyo. The plant was designed to withstand earthquakes up to magnitude 8.2. And to protect against tsunamis, engineers built a seawall 5.7 meters high. In 2008, TEPCO engineers ran a simulation. They calculated that a tsunami at Fukushima could reach 10.2 meters, almost twice the height of the seawall. The report was sent to senior management. TEPCO ignored it. It would cost too much to rebuild the seawall. Besides, a tsunami that big had never happened in recorded history. What were the chances? March 11th, 2011, 2:46 p.m. local time. 130 kilometers off the coast of Japan, deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, the Pacific tectonic plate suddenly slipped under the North American plate. In 6 terrifying minutes, an area of sea floor the size of Connecticut lurched upward by 50 meters. The earthquake measured 9.1 on the Richter scale. It was so powerful, it moved the entire main island of Japan 2.4 meters to the east. It shifted the Earth's axis by 17 centimeters. It shortened the length of a day by 1.8 microseconds. At the Fukushima Daiichi plant, the 3 reactors that were operating, units 1, 2, and 3, automatically shut down the moment the ground started shaking. This was the safety system working exactly as designed. But here's the problem with nuclear reactors. Even when you shut them down, the fuel inside stays hot, incredibly hot. You need to keep pumping cold water through the reactor for days, even weeks, to prevent a meltdown. And to pump that water, you need electricity. The earthquake had knocked out the power grid, but Fukushima had backup. 13 diesel generators, located in the basements of the reactor buildings. They kicked on automatically. Everything was under control. For exactly 41 minutes. At 3:27 p.m., the first tsunami wave hit the Fukushima Daiichi plant. It was 4 meters high. The 5.7-meter seawall held. At 3:35 p.m., the second wave arrived. It was 15 meters tall. The water obliterated the seawall. It smashed through the plant, flooding everything in its path. The turbine buildings, the reactor buildings, and most importantly, the basements, where all 13 diesel generators were located. Within seconds, 12 of the 13 generators were dead, drowned in seawater. At the central control room, the lights went out. The monitors went black. The plant manager, Masao Yoshida, stood in near darkness, listening to the silence of the reactors. He knew exactly what was happening and exactly what it meant. The reactors were losing their cooling water. The nuclear fuel inside was beginning to heat up. With nothing to stop it, the temperature would rise to 1,200 degrees Celsius, then 2,000, then 2,800 degrees. At that point, the fuel rods themselves would begin to melt. A nuclear meltdown. Yoshida picked up a phone that still worked and called TEPCO headquarters in Tokyo. "We have a station blackout," he said. "All cooling is lost. We are heading for a meltdown." Masao Yoshida was 56 years old, an engineer who had worked for TEPCO his entire career. He was known inside the company as stubborn, independent, and sometimes difficult to manage. On March 11, 2011, those qualities saved Japan. As the reactors spiraled toward meltdown, Yoshida made a decision that would later be called heroic and illegal. He needed to cool the reactors. He had no fresh water. He had no power to pump it, even if he did. So he ordered his workers to use the only water available: seawater. This was a catastrophic decision from a business standpoint. Seawater is corrosive. Using it to cool a nuclear reactor would permanently destroy it. A single reactor at Fukushima was worth billions of dollars. TEPCO headquarters in Tokyo gave a direct order: do not use seawater. Yoshida listened to the order. Then he looked at his workers and quietly said, "Ignore that. Keep pumping seawater." He later admitted he was terrified. If the reactors were saved, he might be fired or prosecuted for disobeying orders. But if he stopped the seawater, millions of people could die. Meanwhile, inside the reactors, hydrogen gas was building up. This is what happens when nuclear fuel overheats. The zirconium cladding around the fuel rods reacts with steam and produces hydrogen. Hydrogen is extremely explosive. On March 12th, at 3:36 p.m., exactly 24 hours after the earthquake, Reactor 1 exploded. The entire top of the reactor building was blown off in a massive hydrogen explosion. On live television, the world watched a Japanese nuclear reactor disintegrate in real time. 2 days later, Reactor 3 exploded. The next day, Reactor 4. And inside Reactor 2, something even worse was happening. The nuclear fuel had completely melted through the bottom of the reactor vessel. It was now a pool of molten uranium, burning through the concrete floor, heading toward the ground below. This was the nightmare scenario. If that molten fuel reached the groundwater, it would trigger a massive steam explosion, dispersing radioactive material across all of Japan. In Tokyo, Prime Minister Naoto Kan was in crisis mode. On March 14th, he received a classified report from his nuclear advisors. The report contained a worst-case scenario. If all 3 reactors at Fukushima went into full meltdown and the spent fuel pools also caught fire, the radioactive contamination would be so severe that a 250-kilometer exclusion zone would need to be established. 250 kilometers. Tokyo is 220 kilometers from Fukushima, the capital of Japan, 37 million people, the world's largest metropolitan area. It would have to be evacuated. Khan later said it was the most terrifying moment of his life. He quietly ordered his staff to begin planning the impossible, the evacuation of Tokyo. The plan was never made public. It was never executed. But for 72 hours in March 2011, The Japanese government genuinely believed that Tokyo might have to be abandoned forever. What saved Tokyo was Masao Yoshida and his team at Fukushima. They stayed at the plant when everyone else evacuated. They became known as the Fukushima 50, though there were actually closer to 70 of them. These workers went into reactor buildings that were so radioactive they knew they were receiving lethal doses. They did it anyway. They pumped seawater. They vented hydrogen. They fought fires. They stopped the meltdown from becoming a total catastrophe. By March 15th, the reactors were stabilizing. Tokyo was safe, but Fukushima Prefecture was not. 150,000 people were evacuated from around the Fukushima plant. Entire towns became ghost towns overnight. Nami, Futaba, Okuma. These places had existed for hundreds of years. Now they were empty, and TEPCO began to lie. For weeks, the company and the Japanese government insisted that the reactors had not experienced a full meltdown. They used vague language, partial fuel damage, core issues. It took TEPCO 2 months to officially admit what everyone already knew. All 3 reactors had melted down completely. The lies continued. TEPCO claimed radiation levels were lower than they actually were. They claimed the damage was contained when it wasn't. They claimed the cleanup would take 30 years. That estimate has now stretched to 40 years, then 50. No one actually knows. Inside the destroyed reactor buildings, 880 tons of melted nuclear fuel still sits. It is so radioactive that any human who approached it would die within minutes. TEPCO has tried sending robots to investigate. The robots die too, their electronics destroyed by radiation. As of 2024, no one has figured out how to remove the fuel. No one even knows if it's possible. And then there's the water. Every day, groundwater flows through the damaged reactor buildings, becoming contaminated with radioactive material. TEPCO collects this water and stores it in massive tanks at the plant. As of 2024, there are over 1,000 tanks holding 1.3 million tons of radioactive water. They're running out of space. In 2023, Japan began doing something controversial, releasing the water into the Pacific Ocean. The government says it's safe. The water has been filtered. Most of the radioactive elements have been removed. What remains, they claim, is diluted to harmless levels. China, South Korea, and Pacific Island nations disagree. Fishermen have lost their livelihoods. Protests continue to this day. Masao Yoshida, the plant manager who defied orders and saved Japan, left Fukushima in December 2011, 9 months after the disaster. He was diagnosed with esophageal cancer. TEPCO and the Japanese government insisted his cancer had nothing to do with radiation exposure. They said the cancer type doesn't usually develop that quickly from radiation. Yoshida never publicly blamed anyone. In his testimony before the government investigation, he described the night of March 11th simply, "I thought I was going to die. I thought we all were." He died in July 2013. He was 58 years old. His final words to his team at Fukushima before he left the plant for the last time were, "I'm sorry, I can't stay to finish the job." Today, Masao Yoshida is remembered in Japan as a hero, though not officially. TEPCO never gave him an award. The government never honored him. But the workers who were with him at Fukushima have spoken at length about the man who refused to let his country die. Fukushima killed one person directly, a worker who suffered a heart attack during the crisis. The radiation released has been linked to an estimated 130 future cancer deaths over the next 50 years, though some studies suggest the number could be much higher. But the disaster changed Japan forever. All 54 of Japan's nuclear reactors were shut down after the accident. Most are still not operating. Japan now imports massive amounts of oil and gas, driving up energy prices across the entire country. Germany, thousands of miles away, watched Fukushima and decided to shut down all of its own nuclear plants. France is reconsidering its nuclear program. The entire global conversation about nuclear power was reshaped by what happened on March 11, 2011. The Fukushima disaster was not caused by an earthquake. It was not caused by a tsunami. It was caused by human decisions, by TEPCO executives who ignored warnings, who built a seawall too short, who prioritized cost over safety. The engineers in 2008 had done the math. They knew a 10-meter tsunami was possible. They were ignored. And somewhere, deep inside the ruins of the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, 880 tons of molten nuclear fuel still burns. It will continue to burn and to slowly cool for the next 1,000 years. There is no plan to remove it. There may never be one. The plant that was supposed to power Japan for the 21st century will instead stand as a warning to future generations. Nature always wins, and the price of forgetting that lesson is measured in lives, in cities, in the death of entire regions. Fukushima is not over. It will never be over.